founder and president of Emerson Collective, and board chair at Elemental Accelerator, an organization working on a model for climate equity and innovation. We have less than 10 years to reverse the course of climate change. I'm optimistic that we'll rise to this challenge, not only because of the leadership that the Biden administration is showing, but because entrepreneurs and communities are proving every day that a clean economy is possible. I'm honored to moderate this discussion between Jennifer Granholm, our nation's 16th Secretary of Energy, and the former governor of Michigan, and Donnel Baird, the CEO of BlocPower, an elemental portfolio company. Our two guests have different roles and perspectives, and I hope this will be the first of many conversations during this time of rapid investment and innovation, because it's imperative that we partner widely among all of us. But before we begin, I'd like to share a brief video about BlocPower. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Before we hear more about BlocPower, I would love to start with you, Secretary Granholm. Madam Secretary, you are on the front lines advocating for federal investments that will spur climate innovation, and your focus is on creating millions of jobs. In this moment, can you talk about how climate innovation creates broad economic opportunity and growth?
You bet. I say this as the former governor of Michigan during a time when the auto industry was in meltdown, and we used the opportunities to diversify our economy into clean energy. We built car 1.0, so we wanted to build car 2.0, which was the electric vehicle, as a way of creating jobs for people, especially after we had come out of a terrible recession. So as President Biden says, when we think about climate change, we should be thinking jobs. With the American Jobs Plan that he has proposed, the whole notion here is that we're going to rebuild America by creating millions of good paying jobs in communities all over the country in this clean energy sector, but in other ways as well. But from my hat, of course, I'm focused on climate and on energy. So we want to put Americans to work in this emerging clean energy economy. So there is a report that was out as of 2 weeks ago from Georgetown that said that the world is going to be investing $23 trillion in products that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally. $23 trillion market, right? And so the question is for us as a nation is, are we going to just stand by the road and allow our economic competitors to take that? Or are we going to get in the game? Will we take advantage of this massive opportunity? So there have been independent analyses from Moody's, for example, that shows that the American Jobs Plan will help to create 19 million good paying jobs. So, and that study out of Georgetown said that 90% of the infrastructure jobs created can be filled by people who don't have a college degree. So with respect to fossil communities, the American Jobs Plan includes $16 billion to plug orphan oil and gas wells and clean up abandoned mines, to put workers who have been impacted by the energy transition to work, a lot of whom are from rural communities that have suffered years of disinvestment. And the bottom line is that this sector, this clean energy sector, creates all kinds of jobs for all kinds of people in all pockets of the country, from electricians and utility workers to do the EV charging installation or solar arrays or microgrids or battery energy storage or grid infrastructure, sheet metal workers who can do energy efficiency work, pipe fitters and boiler makers and iron workers and others to reinforce existing pipelines and minimize the environmental impacts of the current infrastructure like methane leakage from natural gas pipelines. This plan can create new opportunities like union steel workers building offshore wind turbines and Teamsters driving zero emission heavy duty trucks. Miners and oil workers might be interested in geothermal energy or responsibly, sustainably mining for the critical minerals that we find in batteries like lithium or cobalt. It's a huge jobs opportunity.
Yes, I mean, you paint a really powerful picture of widespread economic growth. Um, Donnel, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what the secretary was just painting for us, this picture. And so you're a leader in breaking down barriers to innovation and making space for those millions of jobs to exist in communities that need them the most. And the American Jobs Plan targets 40% of the benefits of climate and clean infrastructure investments to disadvantaged communities. Tell us a little bit about BlocPower, if you will, and where you see the most opportunity.
Well, I'm just so delighted and frankly a little bit intimidated to be here with both of you today. You know, BlocPower is a clean tech startup. We got started with a contract from the U.S. Department of Energy in 2014 and an investment from the Elemental Accelerator, where Laurene is the chair. And we focus on greening buildings in low-income communities. And so we've greened buildings in about 1,100 apartment buildings and churches and synagogues and mosques and schools, low-income communities where what we've learned is there's a waste, not only of fossil fuels because the buildings are old and neglected, there may be a history of redlining, there's limited access to capital, and so the buildings waste a ton of fossil fuels per square foot. By some estimates, well over $100 billion a year of fossil fuels are wasted in community buildings and apartment buildings across the country. But there's also a waste of human potential. And what do I mean by that? I mean, there's too many young people in these communities, too many young parents and families who are unemployed, who don't have dignified work and can't take care of their family. And so this vision of a clean energy economy that the secretary has painted is paramount, and it's real, and it's critical. When we first got started, I'll just talk for 30 seconds about our very first project. It was a Catholic school in the Bronx, and the school was burning oil for heat and for hot water, and it was next to a highway. And the ventilation system in the school would suck in air pollution from the highway and from the oil burning heating system in the basement and basically dump all of that air pollution into the cafeteria. And every day, all the 4 and 5-year-olds would have asthma attacks. One day, a 4-year-old had an asthma attack. His parents came to take him to the ER, and later that night, he died. This isn't ancient Mesopotamia where we should be, burning fossil fuels in our schools. Can you imagine trying to learn in a school where all the kids are having asthma attacks after lunch every day because the cafeteria is polluted, where the school nurse has 70 Ziploc bags with every little kid's name taped to it so that she can figure out which inhaler to hand to which kid? This is America in the 21st century. So it's time to move forward and electrify all of our buildings, move them off of fossil fuels, fully electrify them, and create the jobs that we need across the country.
Thank you for that. Secretary Granholm, as we listen to Donnel's stories, how do you think about the Department of Energy's role in investing in technology while ensuring equity is at the core?
Yeah, it's a great question, Donnel. I so appreciated what you have to say, because equity has to go hand in hand with our climate investments, because we know our current energy system doesn't work for too many Americans, particularly in communities of color, not only from the environmental injustice that you say, where children can't even breathe because they are in, under the smokestack of, a polluting plant, or they're on the front lines. But in addition to that, the poorest families, as you know, in this country, pay far more of their income for energy costs, like upwards of 30%, whereas higher income families pay about 3% or less. That's an injustice too. So we need to make a local clean energy, we need to make it at the local level a reality in more parts of America, and accelerate this access to weatherization programs in Black and Brown and Indigenous communities so homes can be retrofitted and made more energy efficient. the American Jobs Plan is going to increase significantly by billions the investment in weatherization, and it's designed, the American Jobs Plan is to direct 40% of all investments within communities that have been left behind for far too long. So those impacted by pollution need to be the first to benefit from clean energy solutions. Billions are going to go toward addressing harms created by old infrastructure, from expressways that maybe cut neighborhoods off to refineries that spewed toxins into the air above lower income communities, to an out-of-date electrical grid that leaves communities of color more vulnerable during extreme weather events. Not only will we make sure that Americans of all backgrounds get the good paying jobs needed for these infrastructure projects, and not only will we ensure that the weatherization assistance helps to shore up the incomes of people who are living in homes that are leaking warm or cold air, depending on the season. But in addition to that, the American Jobs Plan is going to give HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, up to $20 billion to help train more people of color for STEM careers overall. So small businesses in communities of color and economically disadvantaged communities are also going to gain greater access to credit and to venture capital and to R&D funding because of this focus on 40% of the benefits going to communities who have for far too long been unseen and been disproportionately hurt by environmental pollution.
Thank you both. I know we're coming to a close in our conversation, but I'd like to ask you both to respond to the final question. We all see entrepreneurs as the engine for our country's economic growth in the coming decades. As we know from history, we do not suffer from a shortage of ideas or ambition. So I'd like to hear both of your thoughts, Donnel first and then Secretary Granholm. How can we use the momentum we have now to become a model for successful climate innovation, to reach the speed and scale we need to reach in the next decade?
Thanks, Laurene. I really think there's a lot to learn from some of the race to the top frameworks in the education sector, as well as some of the work that's happening at Elemental Accelerator, which is this idea of what does it look like to have a robust public-private partnership that has community at its center and is really working towards the goal of building connective tissue between Silicon Valley, Wall Street, the construction trades unions, who I used to work for and know all about their positives and negatives, of which there are many of both. How do you connect the different parts of our society where there's software innovation and financial innovation and hardware innovation and manufacturing and construction innovation? There needs to be connective tissue between those folks and communities in need of environmental justice who have been, let's be frank, badly mistreated in the past, who rightfully have issues with trust. I mean, we're seeing that in terms of the vaccine distribution, how the legacy of historic disenfranchisement impacts what happens today. We need low-income communities across the country to embrace clean technologies and the jobs and the health and the energy savings that come with it. And part of that is building up trusted intermediaries across the country that can connect municipal government to minority-owned small businesses, to startups, to Wall Street banks. We benefited from that in terms of the Elemental Accelerator connecting us to the California government and to parts of Goldman Sachs, and giving us the technical advice that we needed to kind of scale up and learn how to collaborate across these different innovation hubs in our society. And so I'd love to see more of that get scaled up across the country. I think that's going to create a pathway, a kind of race to the top. The other thing I'd say quickly is we want to see some of it be pay for performance. Low-income communities deserve the best of the best in terms of services and products. And so the private sector should be willing to stand behind their work and guarantee its performance before receiving a dime of government money. In that way, we'll be able to leverage, for every dollar of government money we get, we can raise $10 of private sector capital and stretch this infrastructure and clean economy investments much further.
And let me just, can I just build on what Donnel says? I want to, you asked about momentum, and I feel like it's for those of us in this administration, it's not a 10-year window, that we've got 4 years, and now what is it, less than 950 days to be able to make a lasting impact to get this going. So, you know, from my perspective, the Department of Energy, we have led historically on the research and development side through the innovation in our 17 labs. And that's a super important part of the puzzle. But we also have to have like a hair on fire mentality of deploying the technologies that we have researched in the labs and getting them out into the field, on the ground, putting steel in the ground, putting people to work. The American Jobs Plan has got to be a critical portion of that momentum. It invests $180 billion on research and development, great, and over $100 billion on manufacturing, which is great. And we want to make sure that the best ideas that are being dreamed up in the labs are being manufactured in America, putting people to work and addressing this existential crisis that we're all facing, which is the climate crisis. Our hair is on fire, and we're going to keep it on fire until we have none left, because we have got to solve this problem, and soon.
Thank you both so much. I think everything that you had to say is really important and energizing, and gives me a lot of optimism. Secretary Granholm, Donnel, Baird, thank you for this conversation. It's clear that we all need to work together, from technologists and startups to grassroots and community organizations and all levels of government. And when we bring together our different perspectives and experiences, I think with the tools at scale, we will live in harmony on this planet that we all cherish. So thank you again. And I look forward to seeing what we create together during this critical moment of climate action.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.